They had no wine. One of the interpretations, or at least one of the readings that we can try to get out of this statement is that the family and the bridegroom forgot to order wine for the weddings. But I think that reading or interpretation is a little bit short because as we remember, toward the end of the gospel passage, the implication was that everyone serves good wine first, and then when people have drunk freely, an inferior one. But you have kept the good wine until now. So it seemed to indicate that they ran out of wine. The questions I would like to take to ask here is, if Jesus was not there at this wedding, whether the wedding would continue and people would still drink freely. Probably so, but I think we can take one step further and say that with Jesus, the event or the overall celebration became better with his miracle making, changing water into wine. And one step further, I may say that beside or behind Jesus, God is the one that directs all of the activities that was happening at this wedding. Just remind ourselves also of the first reading today from the prophet Isaiah toward the end of the book, chapter 62. And God promised the Israelites now on their way home from Babylonian exile that their identity now has been vindicated and validated by God. Their own name will be known to the nation. So God is really behind their own living, their own activities, their own existence. More so and even more specific, I would say, that the second reading today from Paul's letter to the first letter to the Corinthian Christians, Paul tells the Corinthian Christian that each and every one of them was endowed with certain gifts. And all of them and all of the gifts put together to make the community, to make who they were, that will all given back to God. God is the one who is the proponent of all of those gifts that were endowed, that were given to them. So as I see in these three readings, once again in our now we are in the second week in ordinary time. And ordinary time is also a time for us to journey toward the ultimate ends of our faith. It is a journey of faith. And the readings of the scriptures wants to remind us that God is the proponent of all of the things that we do. I would like to go back to the gospel reading for a moment. As I said at the beginning of this Mass, that the statement said to the bridegroom by the head waiter, "You have kept the good wine until now." For those who are interested in the Gospel of John, there's 21 chapters, and scholars try to divide this book into two major parts. The first major part is the book of signs, and the second major part is the book of glory. And in that was divided into chapter 1 to the end of chapter 2, 12, and then 13, 1 to 21, 25 is the second part. And in the first part, in the book of signs, again, it is divided into a further division. In this section, chapter 2 that we heard today, Jesus happened to be at Cana. And it lasts until the end of chapter 4. And sometimes it is called the journey of Jesus from Cana back to Cana. Why it says so? Because now Jesus in Cana, in a village, a small village in Galilee, And we heard this miracle, and after this, Jesus happened to be in Jerusalem, in which he was arguing with the Jews about their Jewish feast in the temple. And then afterward, in chapter 3, we are very familiar with the dialogue between Jesus and Nicodemus. And after that long chapter, we go to chapter 4. And the first part of that chapter is Jesus' dialogue with the woman from Samaria. And the second half of that chapter 4, Jesus on his way back to Galilee. And he ran into an official known as, or sometimes we call the Roman official, a foreigner, a Gentile, who has a son who fell ill, who asked Jesus to heal his son. So it happened first at Cana and then second at Cana. And in this part, the journey of Jesus from Cana to Jerusalem and then back to Cana, Jesus performed 2 signs, and one of which we heard today is Jesus changed water into wine. I would like to make a side note to this. In chapter 4, in the dialogue between Jesus and the woman from Samaria, there's one verse there that sometimes history has tried to obliterate, and sometimes we too try to forget that. Namely, when he was telling the woman at the well in Samaria that she thinks that the well was given to her and to her people from Jacob as a source of living water. And Jesus replied theologically, of course, by implication that salvation is from the Jews. For those of us who have not been familiar, but during World War II, in the decade in which Adolf Hitler was in power, and he forbade all of the Bibles during that 10 years from 1930 to early 1940 to leave out that very verse that salvation is from the Jews. Because we all recall that one of his reasons to do so because many Jews was murdered during his tenure. The reason I say this is because sometimes history tries to obliterate the truth about where or the source of our own salvation. I, for one, would like to restate that very firmly, that without Jesus, without Paul, without Jesus' disciples who spread the gospel, the good news to Gentiles, like we heard eventually the official, Roman official who received a miracle from Jesus, salvation would not have come to all of us Gentiles. Going back to the message today, as I said earlier, God is the proponent. God is the one who drives and directs our actions. Without Jesus, I can imagine that the wedding would continue. But of course, we heard they ran out of wine. Jesus, in the background, in a short dialogue with his mother, and with a small touch from the finger of God, he changed water into wine, which makes the wedding, which gave the wedding more flavor, more complete, more enjoyable. And that's why for the evangelists write this to tell us that the family or the bridegroom have kept the good wine until now. For some reason, we can imagine or try to understand this with theological implication that for centuries until the time of Jesus, many Jews believed that salvation eventually would come, but they did not know how it came. During the time of Jesus, people were living under the Roman Empire. And for those who were oppressed, they thought that the only way for them to receive salvation was from liberation. But for now, by the time Jesus who came to show them the way to God, then Jesus himself, with the implication now water has changed, or they have kept, or the Jew or Jewish people have kept God's salvation until now. And also, as a result of that, with Jesus, he is the mediator. He is the bridge between humanity and God. How do we see this for today, for our own time? As I mentioned briefly in the announcement over last weekend, many of us who attended the Feast of Epiphany on Saturday, 2 weeks ago yesterday, the church was 3-4 times fuller than this time, and God willing, we will have many of those occasions once again. But I would like to bring out a few things that I wanted to say that God and here Jesus was behind all of what we do. This week we had a meeting with the worship committee. There was more than 10 of us was there. And the meeting within an hour or so, almost 2 hours. And we cover so many things in the last 2 seasons of Advent and then Christmas. And many of us may not be aware, but without the planning, for example, of the liturgy, of the music, our Mass, our Eucharist continue, but the flavor is not there. The completeness is not there. And the feeling uplifting is not there. With good preparation, we have what we celebrate. We feel at home with our liturgy. Not only that, those who were there here on Saturday, 2 weeks ago, after the liturgy, we went into the community center for the round table meal. And because of the crowd, we ran out of food, we ran out of paper plate, we ran out of forks, we ran out of wine. But then moments later, our volunteers, one by one, went out and got new bottles of wine in and brought in more drinks. All of those things, if we see that without the willingness and the commitment, the gifts of each individual that put the whole celebration together, of course the meal would continue. But without God who directs the heart of those people, we would have missed the flavor of what we celebrate. Without the preparation of the music, the liturgy, and all of those volunteers put together, we would have missed the beauty, the uplifting spirit that each and all of us have. Paul told the Corinthians then, he continues to remind us, each of us has been given the gift, and when we come together and put it together, all of those gifts, when they are put in good use, the same Spirit, the same God, the same Jesus is behind all of us.